The wind changed direction, and 11 Caelus lions stopped moving at the exact same moment. I had been walking this step for 9 years. I had never seen that happen before. Not once. Caelus lions do not stop. They stalk, they circle, they close the distance in silence, and then they strike. That is the only pattern they know. But on that afternoon, with the grass bending under a cold wind, and the dust rising off the broken rocks, all 11 of them froze, turned their heads toward us, and then walked away. They walked away from me and from the human standing beside me. His name was Daniel. He was my apprentice, assigned to me by the Ranger Corps 3 weeks earlier, and until that afternoon I had not taken him seriously for a single day. Let me explain why. I am a Thren. My people are built for this work. We have claws that can grip stone, ears that hear a heartbeat from far away, and a sense of smell so sharp we can track a wounded animal for 2 days without losing the trail. Daniel had none of that. He was slower than me on the rocks, weaker than me in the arms, and blind compared to me in the dark. When the Corps told me they were sending a human recruit to train under me for the migration season, I laughed out loud in front of 3 other rangers. I remember saying that I would have him begging to go home within a week. He did not go home. He showed up the first morning with a small notebook, a calm face, and a strange kind of patience that I mistook for slowness. He asked good questions, too many of them in my opinion. He wanted to know how the Caelus lions decided who to hunt, how far their sense of smell reached, how they moved as a group. I answered him the way you answer a child asking about fire, with short sentences and very little detail, because I did not think he needed to know more than that. I was wrong about a lot of things that season, but I did not know it yet. Our task was simple on paper. Every 3 seasons, 11 million grazing animals called Valathorn cross the steppe in a single migration, and every hunting animal on the continent follows them. Our job was to walk beside the migration, record what we saw, and stay alive while doing it. The Caelus lions were the biggest danger, 6 meters tall at the shoulder, fast enough to close 100 meters before you could blink twice, and smart enough to hunt in groups that surrounded prey from every direction at once. Even experienced rangers kept 2 kilometers of distance from a hunting pride. That was the rule. That was the only reason any of us lived long enough to retire. For the first 3 days, everything went the way I expected. Daniel struggled on the rock paths. He could not track by scent the way I could, so he tracked by footprints in broken grass instead, which was slower but not as useless as I had assumed it would be. He did not complain about the cold nights, even though the temperature on the steppe drops fast enough to kill an unprepared traveler. He did not complain about anything. That should have told me something was different about him, but I was too busy being annoyed to notice. On the 4th day, we climbed a ridge above a river crossing where the herds had gathered into a tight, nervous mass. I smelled the pride before I saw them. 11 Caelus lions spread out along the edge of the herd in a hunting formation I had watched 100 times before. I put my hand on Daniel's chest to signal him to stop and stay low. He stopped. He did not lower himself the way I had trained him to. He just stood there, still and quiet, watching. The lead lioness caught our scent on the wind. I felt her attention shift toward us the way you feel someone staring at your back in a crowded room. Her ears went flat against her skull. Her weight shifted onto her back legs, the way a predator shifts before it decides to strike. And then she turned around and walked away, calling the rest of the pride with 3 short, sharp sounds. They followed her without hesitation, moving wide around our position, giving up an hour of good hunting ground to avoid coming any closer to us. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. That is not normal, I said, mostly to myself. Daniel looked at the retreating pride, then at me. Didn't think it would be, he said quietly, and went back to writing in his notebook. I told myself it was a coincidence. Predators change their behavior for all kinds of reasons. Maybe the wind carried a scent from somewhere else. Maybe the herd had spooked them first. I had an explanation ready for every possibility except the one that turned out to be true. 2 days later it happened again. A single male Caelus lion had been stalking a wounded young Valathorn for nearly an hour, moving with the kind of patience only a true apex hunter has. He was close enough to strike. He had already won. And then the wind shifted, carrying our scent toward him, and he broke off in the middle of his approach and put 400 meters between himself and us before he even looked back to check what he was running from. By the 5th time it happened, I stopped telling myself it was a coincidence. Trackers are trained to notice patterns, and this was a pattern too strong to ignore, even though it made no sense to me at all. That night, sitting by the fire, I finally asked Daniel the question that had been sitting in my chest for days. "They are not afraid of me," I said. "I have walked this steppe for 9 years. Nothing has ever run from me before you arrived. Daniel was quiet for a while, turning a stick slowly in the fire. Then he asked me something in return. "Can I ask you a question without you laughing at me again?" I did not answer, but he had learned by then that my silence usually meant yes. "What does fear smell like to them?" he asked. "Prey fear, I mean. The kind that makes a predator move in for the kill." "Sharp," I said. "It comes through the sweat, through the breath. It is very easy to notice once you know what to look for." "And what do I smell like?" I had not thought about it before that moment, because I had never needed to. Every creature on that step that was not Thren either smelled like fear or smelled like prey, too foolish to know it should be afraid. Daniel smelled like neither. He smelled like nothing had ever successfully hunted him in his entire history, and his body had simply stopped producing the chemical signals that came from that kind of fear. "On my planet," he said, staring into the fire, "we spent a very long time as the thing that hunted the hunters. Long enough that it changed something in us. I did not want to say that out loud earlier, because I thought you would laugh at me again." I did not laugh. I had not laughed since the ridge. 2 nights later, the real danger arrived, and it had nothing to do with the Kalis lions. We were crossing a narrow stretch of dry riverbed when the ground beneath us began to shake. At first I thought it was the herd changing direction, but the sound was wrong. It was faster, sharper, and it was coming from behind us, not ahead. I turned and saw a wall of water moving down the riverbed at a speed I had never witnessed before. A flash flood caused by a storm somewhere far up in the mountains, one we had no warning of because the wind had been blowing the wrong way to carry the sound to us. There was no time to climb the steep banks on either side. The rock walls were too smooth, too high, and the water was already close enough that I could feel the cold air pushing ahead of it. Daniel grabbed my arm and pointed toward a narrow crack in the rock wall a short distance away, barely wide enough for one body to fit through. I would never have noticed it myself. My eyes were built for open ground and moving prey, not for spotting small gaps in stone. His eyes, slower in every other way, had caught the one detail that mattered most in that moment. We ran. The water hit the riverbed behind us with a force that threw spray high into the air, and for a few seconds I was certain we would not make it. Daniel reached the crack first and pulled himself through sideways, then turned and grabbed my arm to help me follow. The water reached the base of the rock just as I pulled my legs free, soaking my boots but nothing more. We climbed higher into the crack until we found a small ledge above the floodline, and we sat there in silence, breathing hard, watching the water roar past below us. "How did you see that gap?" I asked, once I trusted my voice again. "I was not looking for prey," he said. "I was looking for a way out. Different way of watching the world, I suppose." I thought about that for a long time after we climbed down the next morning, once the flood had passed and the riverbed had returned to its usual quiet stillness. I had spent my whole life trained to see the world through the eyes of a hunter, always looking for the next kill, the next trail, the next sign of weakness in something else. Daniel saw the world differently. He was always looking for the way through, the way out, the safest path forward. It was not a weaker way of seeing, it was simply a different one, and on that riverbed, it had saved both our lives. We finished the migration survey without a single close encounter with the Kalis lions after that, which had never happened in any of my previous 9 seasons. When I filed my report back at the ranger station, my old friend Grace read through it twice before looking up at me. "You want me to include the part about the lions retreating?" she asked. "Command will not believe it." "Leave it in," I said. "I want it written down, in my own words, that I laughed at my apprentice on his first day, and that the oldest hunters on this entire steppe took one look at him and decided the smartest thing they could do was walk away." Grace raised an eyebrow but did not argue. She filed the report exactly as I had written it. I still outrank Daniel. I still call him my apprentice when we walk out onto the steppe together, but I have not laughed at him since that day on the ridge, and I do not think I ever will again. Some lessons only need to be learned once, especially when the ones teaching them happen to be the last creatures on the planet you would ever expect to run.